Hi, friends. Welcome back to Tuesday's episode of Flat Stanley. Today I'm going to read chapter 2 of Flat Stanley, and it's called Being Flat. And chapter 1 was called The Big Bulletin Board. So in chapter 1, remember that that bulletin board that Stanley's dad bought them for Christmas fell on him and made him flat, and his mom was bringing him to the doctor. So now I'm going to read chapter 2, Being Flat. Remember, I'm going to read like this, and if there's a picture, I'll turn around and show it to you. All right, let's get started. I'm going to get to the chapter. All right, chapter 2, Being Flat. When Stanley got used to being flat, he enjoyed it. He could go in and out of rooms, even when the door was closed, just by laying down and sliding through the crack at the bottom. Mr. and Mrs. Lambchop said it was silly, but they were quite proud of him. Arthur got jealous and tried to slide under a door, but he just banged his head. That's the picture. Sliding in and out under the door. Being flat could also be helpful, Stanley found. He was taking a walk with Mrs. Lambchop one afternoon when her favorite ring fell from her finger. The ring rolled across the sidewalk and down between the bars of a grating that covered the deep, dark shaft. Mrs. Lambchop began to cry. "I have an idea," Stanley said. He took the laces out of his shoes and an extra pair out of his pocket and tied them all together to make one long lace. Then he tied one end of that to the back of his belt and gave the other end to his mother. "Lower me," he said, "and I will look for the ring." "Thank you, Stanley," Mrs. Lambchop said. She lowered him between the bars and moved him carefully up and down from one side to "Thank you, Stanley," Mrs. Lambchop said. She lowered him between the bars and moved him carefully up and down and from side to side, so that he could search the whole floor of the shaft. Two policemen came by and stared at Mrs. Lambchop as she stood holding the long lace that ran down through the grating. She pretended not to notice them. "What's the matter, lady?" the first policeman asked. "Is your yo-yo stuck?" "I'm not playing with a yo-yo," Mrs. Lambchop said sharply. "My son is at the other end of this lace, if you must know." "Get the net, Harry," said the second policeman. "We caught a cuckoo." Just then, down in the shaft, Stanley cried out, "Hooray!" Mrs. Lambchop pulled him up and saw that he had the ring. "Good for you, Stanley," she said. Then she turned angrily at the policeman. "A cuckoo indeed," she said. "Shame." The policeman apologized. "We didn't get it, lady," they said. "We have been hasty. We see that now." "People should think twice before making rude remarks," said Mrs. Lambchop, and then not make them at all. The policemen realized that this was a good rule and said they would try to remember it. One day, Stanley got a letter from his friend Thomas Anthony Jeffrey, whose family had moved recently to California. A school vacation was about to begin, and Stanley was invited to spend it with the Jeffreys. "Oh boy," Stanley said, "I would love to go." Mr. Lambchop sighed. "A round-trip train or an airplane ticket to California is very expensive," he said. "I will have to think of some cheaper way." When Mrs. Lambchop came home from the office that evening, he brought with him an enormous brown paper envelope. "Now then, Stanley," he said, "try this for size." The envelope fit Stanley very well. There was even room left over, Mrs. Lambchop discovered, for an egg salad sandwich made with thin bread and a toothbrush case filled with milk. They had to put a great many stamps on the envelope to pay for both airmail and insurance, but it was still much less expensive than a train or an airplane ticket to California. The next day, Mr. and Mrs. Lambchop slid Stanley into his envelope, along with the egg salad sandwich and the toothbrush case full of milk. and mailed him from the box on the corner. The envelope had to be folded to fit through the slot, but Stanley was a limber boy, and inside the box he strained right up again. Mrs. Lambchop was nervous because Stanley had never been away from home alone before. She rapped on the box. "Can you hear me, dear?" she called. "Are you all right?" Stanley's voice came quite clearly. "I'm fine. Can I eat my sandwich now?" "Wait an hour and try not to get overheated, dear," Mrs. Lambchop said. Then she and Mr. Lambchop cried out, "Goodbye, goodbye," and went home. Stanley had a fine time in California. When the visit was over, the Jeffreys returned him in a beautiful white envelope they had made themselves. It had red and blue markings to show that it was airmail, and Thomas Jeffrey had lettered it "valuable and fragile," and "this end up" on both sides. Back home, Stanley told his family that he had been handled so carefully he never felt a single bump. Mr. Lambchop said it proved that jet planes were wonderful, and so was the postal service, and that this was a great age in which to live. Stanley thought so too. All right, that is it for chapter 2. So just to recap, in chapter 1, the bulletin board fell on him. He became flat. And then in chapter 2, Mom lost the ring. Stanley was able to fit through the ground to find it, picked it up, and then he went to visit his friend in California, and when his parents told him he could go, they mailed him. So that's what we are doing with us, even though we're not mailing Flat Ferret. We're emailing him because we can at this day and age. But this is what we're doing. Just like Flat Stanley is going on all these adventures, we are bringing our friend Flat Ferret along with our adventures. So next week we're going to be reading Stanley the Kite, which is chapter 3, and I'm very excited. I can't wait to see what it's about. Stay tuned and see where Flat Ferret and friends visited this week. I can't wait. Thanks.
Flat Ferret and I got to hang out with my mom on the front porch. We got to talk to the people who walked by, from a safe distance, of course. We stayed on the porch, and the other people were on the street. Dougie even got to walk by my house. Hi, Dougie. How fun is that? Can't wait to do more stuff with Flat Ferret. Flat Ferret has been keeping the town of Natick on top of things. Today, he visited with Mary Lou, one of our favorite dinner, movie, and game staff, and Ticket to Adventure. Mary Lou loves hearing about all of the stories from all of us with Flat Ferret, and today he was helping her pay the bills. Thanks, Flat Ferret, for keeping everybody on track.
Hey there, little guy. What are you doing in there?
Good. With Flat Ferret, these past couple hours, we've been really talking, been really connecting. We've been sharing our dreams. He's been supporting me in my dream of becoming a teacher. I want to support him in his dream of becoming a flying ferret. So, friends, we want to support each other. So I helped design a little parachute for Flat Ferret here, and hopefully he'll fly real good.
Ferret, you did it! You flew!
We are the champions, my friends.
Do you want to be featured in a Flat Ferret and Friends video? Don't forget, you can email a photo with a description or send in a video to camparrowheadnatick@gmail.com. See you all next week!